So today I'm sitting down with Eric Heimmes. He's a good friend and he's transforming cultures in a way that I don't think any of us could have predicted. And it was given to him as a direct invitation from God. Welcome back to the O Coalition. I'm here with my good friend Eric Heimmes, who runs the Inspired Culture, and we're in for a treat here. I know a number of cool stories about you, so I kind of know some of what we're in for, but we might uncover some new stuff too. And for everyone else, it's brand new. So first and foremost, this podcast is really about faith and how faith influences our life. And so I'm remembering a story that you and I talked about over at the coffee shop about Christmas lights. And so I want to start there. And I know that might not be the place that you were thinking we're going to start, but let's hear about the Christmas light story.
Driving through the streets of Naperville with my kids, every year we go around and look at all the houses that are totally lit up. And, at this time I'm single, not recently, but divorced and, just getting back out onto the dating scene. And, God identified and shared with me exactly the type of person I'd be marrying. And so.
Now, by the way, how did God, is that the conversation you have with God?
Yeah.
Where you're hearing or you're seeing or what's happening?
Yeah. So he's like literally telling me through reading scripture, prayer, going through it, who I'm going to marry, and I'm just like, okay. And then I'm like, that's a very limited option, in my head. I'm like, it can't be just a widow only.
So literally you're hearing you're going to meet a widow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, meet a widow. And I'm like, how many of those are there? Really? And so I'm like, gosh, you're very narrow, very focused, which I come to find out later. That's a really good thing, for so many reasons. And so, we're, enjoying Christmas season and we're driving past this house, looking at these lights and pulling up to this other house. And I noticed the most random things because that's just me. And I noticed this one house has got a section of lights out on the front of their house. And the Holy Spirit speaks to me in that moment and says, there's a single lady there, a widow, that can't actually fix her lights and she needs help. And I'm like, no, there's no way. That would be so random. And I just slowly drive by and it's like this pull inside to stop and do something. Well, I didn't stop. I just kept going because I'm like, who shows up on somebody's doorstep knocking to say, oh, by the way, I'm going to fix your lights. Mm-hmm. That's really random, especially a single mom widow.
That'd be pretty creepy.
Right? Yeah, I would agree. And so oddly enough, we don't stop. And then when I commit to things, I just get all in on what I'm into. And so I went to this online dating several months later, and I decided to get involved with 5 dating apps all at once. And I gave myself 2 weeks, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to totally commit to this. And and so I, because I just wanted to like understand it, kind of like go through it, and but also be efficient at it because I just didn't have a ton of time. But I gave myself a window, and I said, I'll do this, and got onto eHarmony and Match.com and all the things. And I went on 20 coffee dates in 2 weeks, and the 21st coffee date was this lady named Heather. And I met her and I'm like, oh, I really like her, and we just connected. But before we went on the date, she was like texting and, through the app, our profiles actually laid over really well. I evaluated the profiles on eHarmony with mine and hers. I'm like, oh, this might be a really good fit in it. And so she's chatting with me. Hey, I'll meet for coffee. And I said, well, what if I talk to you first on the phone before we meet? Because I said, you don't know me and I just want you to feel safe and that everything's okay. And so can we have a call? And so we have a call and then we meet for coffee. Well, fast forward, we're dating. And then we're 6 months, 7 months into our relationship, 8, maybe 7 months, and it's Christmas time, this coming year. and I'm hanging up her lights on the front of her house. And I go to turn them on after I hung them up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the house. This is the house we stopped by that I would have never found again. But yet here I am hanging these lights up. And I just come off the ladder. I go inside and I say, Heather, I said, and we've talked about God, the Holy Spirit, and just all the things and how God brought us together. I said, God told me to stop here last year. She's like, well, I wish you would have, because my prayer was that you would just have the guy arrive on my front doorstep.
You're kidding.
I'm not. And so she's
So
like,
it wouldn't have been creepy at all.
No, it wouldn't have been, because it was God's divine plan of how we were supposed to meet. And so she would have been totally, she's like, no, really, that was what I was praying for. God, I don't want to be looking for people. Just have them arrive to my front door, and there's so much more to that story of, she waved off dating when I connected and reached out with her on
because she had sworn off the apps or what.
Yeah,
like,
everything. Like just 2 days before me reaching out. And then she's like, fine, I'll look. And then she's like, oh, he's cute, so I'll talk to him. And so that's where it was. But the whole doorstep thing would have been totally fine. Right. And I just think about that.
It's so good to know.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Because our judgments, I mean, look where I went. I'm like, oh, that would be creepy. It's like, well, it wouldn't have been creepy to her.
Yeah.
It just would have been creepy in my estimation of how I would perceive I would have felt or someone else would have felt in that circumstance. But we're not her.
Right. We're not. And we're not her connected to the Lord and thinking about really how God provides, right? Because she already had prayed, and I did too. And God already told me who, and she was praying for. And, in that moment, I chose not to be obedient to what the Holy Spirit was telling me to do.
Right.
We didn't totally miss the opportunity. God brought it back full circle in another route to get there, right? The thing would have been, though, is that I would have met her 4 months earlier. But God had said, no, this is still your person. We're going to make it happen. This is how it's going to happen. And so I think
she was obedient. She's like, all right, I'll go on one more date.
Yeah. She'll go on one more date, right? And so I think there's that whole story of God's plan and really not listening into the moment, because I was just like, and I'm learning the Holy Spirit's voice, through this process. And I think that's an always discerning process for our entire life,
sure.
To do that. And as we talk about this story, there was an opportunity, but God still kept the opportunity, just created a new moment instead of the moment,
I remember when I met my wife for months earlier, I had seen her. We were at school.
Okay.
So she was a freshman at Marquette. I was a sophomore. It was second semester. And I'd leave the engineering building, and she was coming from the chemistry building, and we'd pass. And we would just make eye contact, and there was something special there. And I was telling my friend Dara about this girl that I kept seeing. And she's like, well, why don't you just ask her out? I'm like, nah. I said, if it's supposed to be, God will figure out a way. And I'm sure Dara was thinking, oh, Mark, you're such a dork, right? But God found a way. And it was through a serendipitous process where I was invited by a different girl to go watch the NCAA basketball tournament. I end up at the dorm, and the elevator doors open, and there's my wife sitting there studying. She looks up, and it felt like time stood still. And it was, again, I mean, you reminded me, like, wow, what a special moment that is when God's involved. Mm-hmm. And so I hear what you're saying. God knew probably that you weren't going to go, because God knows us through and through. So it was probably already in the works that, hey, we're going to have to figure out another way. But Eric's going to remember this one day when he puts up Christmas lights and laugh. I'm so curious. Was it in the same spot? Because Christmas lights, you put up different every year.
The crazy
and you were
thing.
putting them up.
Yeah, it was in the exact same spot. And I'm like, how is this? And who is this person that organizes their lights in a way that go up the exact same way every year? Because she had the strands tied out perfectly to fit the area of the house.
Okay.
And I'm like putting them up there, and I'm like, yeah, it was the same exact spot. And then she had these 3 unique hanging balls that I remember. I'm like, I've never seen that before. It was so unique. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's brilliant. So 2 things I want to bridge off of that. And for people watching, like we all have these moments. It's just that some of us are more aware of more of those moments, and it's like expectant.
Mm-hmm.
There's an expectancy. Like God is just so good, and when we surrender, more of these things happen. Do you remember the pathway to get to a place where you could actually discern the voice of the Holy Spirit?
There's a couple, and it really was after I had to surrender everything in my life, though, for me to really hear and recognize it's no longer Eric driving the bus or the car so caught behind the steering wheel, but God is, and letting go of all of it, and then just trusting every next step.
And this was before Heather.
Before Heather, yeah, definitely. So this is like age 39, where I just surrendered my whole life to Christ.
Why?
And why? Because my decisions weren't working out well, and for a number of reasons. I was lost in my career, myself, super selfish in so many different ways. And so for me, it was costing, my relationship with my current wife at the time, my ex, and then also my kids. I was traveling on 120 airplanes a year, 1,500 planes over 19 years. Like, that's a lot. And I was gone between 150 and 200 nights a year, right? And so building a career, justifying my behavior of, well, I'm supporting my family financially, and, and all the idols that we have in our, I call it the idol closet, and I had to clear them out. I had to get all the idols out, and to, have God work through all of those and work through me. And so it was like I hit 39, I surrendered, and then I became like this child in a way that I didn't know what it was to walk really and like engage and speak, because I was getting taught all these new terms, and getting taught really how to engage differently.
After the surrender.
After the surrender, and the brokenness. And so it was like this fertile soil, and God was just transplanting everything into it.
So for someone, and by the way, just breaking for a moment to the camera, one of the things you're going to hear about in a minute is there's a company I mentioned in the beginning called the Inspired Culture, which Eric has started. And what you just heard there is kind of the seed of what gets created, and it is brilliant. You're going to want to stick around and hear more about it. But before we go there, can you tell us more about that circumstance? Because for someone who has either gone through that, or they're in it, or they're seeking and they haven't found it yet, can you expand upon that? Because it's too simple to say, "Oh, I surrendered myself to Jesus." Like, well, what does that mean? And where were you? And I mean, how broken was broken? And did you have any lessons like, "Oh, if I were to do it again, I could do it this way"? Any kind of words of wisdom that you could sprinkle in there, and insight to help people kind of anchor on what this moment was like?
Yeah. I mean, I don't recommend being so far away that it costs so much to come back. And what I mean by that is like the farther that we live for self, the farther away I feel we're from Christ. And so the farther we venture off, the more broken we'll be, and when we actually look and do the work and let God do that work in us. And so the sooner you can surrender, from my standpoint, the better. And the sooner you can die to self, the better. Because one, it's no longer our purpose, but His purpose in that. And so I think like reflecting on getting to know ourselves is an important start to do an inventory and to really recognize what aligns with the Lord and what does not. And then identifying, okay, that's the work I need to do. Now what's required of me to do it? And you got to remember, I said, what's the work for me to do? It's actually what we have to let go of so God can do the work in and through you in that. And so our job is to let go and surrender and trust and have that faith and giving Him all control. And that is so not normal for anybody to do. But what I can tell you that is on the other side of that, the weight that you carry that you may not actually realize how heavy it is. Me saying that out loud is exhausting mentally. I just want to like take a nap because it is heavy, heavy stuff that you just continue to carry. And you don't realize the weight until you let the weight go.
What was the catalyst to drop the weight?
Yeah, the catalyst is I lost my marriage. I lost myself. I was wrapped up in an addiction. And so all of those things that were there brought me to the pit, the bottom.
And you were still working during that time?
Yeah, still working, all of that, still flying, still traveling, still winning, so call it from what the world would say,
Hanging on to the last vestige of maybe this will help, or maybe I don't know what it even is, the last vestige of hope that something would change without surrendering.
Yeah. And just keep pushing and pushing and pushing to where everything else was starting to crumble. And I didn't know how to invest in the other things. I wasn't equipped. I just didn't know. Yeah. I just knew one thing, Do
people have to crash before they go on this journey?
I don't think so. And that's why we started the Inspired Culture. That's why we're here today talking. I think everybody has the opportunity to change, grow, develop, and let the Lord in before the crash. Others hit the crash, and then they're really faced with a very simple, I'm going to continue to crash or I'm going to turn.
Yeah.
So my hope is that not everybody crashes, because the reality is to crash is a lot more required than choosing to start earlier.
So I know a little bit more than most about kind of what you're working on, and it's incredible. So I want to start with my favorite part, which is the 50 masks, which you can't create unless you know yourself. So when you say that you were refashioned, remolded, that you surrendered, it's like all you got to do is look at the work you've been doing. It's like completely obvious that that's the work of the divine, and you made yourself available to bring that work to the planet. And thank you for doing it. Start where you'd like and how you are bringing this to people, because you're bringing it to, for most parts, the unaware, right? It's not like people are out there necessarily in corporate America saying, oh, I'm looking necessarily for this as an employee. And yet the employees get it, and the ahas are incredible. And they see which masks they're living in of the 50. And you give them practical ways to navigate that, to resolve it, so that they can show up more wholly as who they really are without crashing. And not just themselves, but as teams. So tell us more about where you'd like to go there.
Yeah, I love it. So let's talk about that, because I get excited about it. And for me, it's really important to know ourselves. But also to recognize the ecosystems we live in, which that's the thing that's really hard to see. Because when we're in the ecosystem, we're part of the system, which means that we're an operational aspect of it, and we're contributing to the environment, healthy or unhealthy, right? And so in the workplace, especially, there's all these ecosystems or cultures that live, right? And culture is good, and it could be unhealthy, but culture is really, made up of, if you have 10,000, there's 10 million paint colors, right? And so think of each of us as one of those color chips walking into an organization. We're part of the color of that culture, right? And so we're bringing in ourselves, but then we find in there that in this color system, there's only actually a few primary colors. Right. And so those primary colors take away all the other shades. And then all of a sudden we're living in this ecosystem, in this environment, and we become contributors to those colors, not necessarily becoming the colors we're called to be in it. And so what happens is you just start living out who you're around, and you start becoming part of that instead of growing into who you're called to be. And so there's a dilutedness that takes place. And so from our vantage point, we believe that the best organized organizations run well on intrinsic fuel, where our teams are intrinsically motivated. But that requires us to know our purpose and our identity and who we are, and actually how we impact the organizations we work with and how we impact that vision. And so we have to have that alignment. Well, until we actually know what masks we're wearing, we actually don't know how to impact that well.
And just what's a mask?
So the masks say, self-reliant leader, for example, right? So that is where, it is what it is, right? We're coming in. If it's up to, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And I don't need anybody's help, right? And so therefore, I might think that's good in wearing that mask. Why am I wearing that mask? Well, I might be wearing it because I believe that my ability to work hard equals my value, or my ability to perform at a certain level equals my value. But yet our value sits in the Lord, right? And who God called us to be. So our value doesn't equal our worth, or our worth isn't equal to our work necessarily, because our worth comes from something else, not of people of this world, right? And what they have to say or not say. And so as we get into these masks, we gotta recognize, one, and understand what it is, why we're wearing it, what we believe we're getting from wearing it, and how it's impacting everybody else around us. And the thing is that masks are usually self-serving, and by the way, we all wear them to some degree. And there's been plenty of times in my career I probably wore 7 or 8 all at once. Because I was a highly insecure leader. I also felt that if I wasn't the top performer, always, I wasn't loved, right? And so I was doing
So those
things.
are 2 more masks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the silent sufferer, right? Everything's fine. I've got it under control.
Yep.
I'm not going to say I need help. And I'm also going to be the cheerleader, and every challenge is an opportunity. And I'm just going to put that out there, right? And so it's not a problem. We don't have problems here. There's just opportunities, right? But yeah, it's okay to say we have a problem, and it's okay to say we can work on that problem, together. And so what we want to do, and why we created the masks, is for people to connect with themselves, to come and be more vulnerable with themselves, but then also vulnerable within others in the organization. Because when we have that depth of trust and knowing one another, we can actually do a lot of great things together quickly. But when we live in disguise and when we hide behind our masks, there's a break in trust automatically. And you might think that there isn't, because you're putting a lot of energy into your image. Mm-hmm. But the reality is everybody else can see that you are. Right. And so
even if they can't name it.
Right.
Right. So it's things like, and we become accustomed to, oh, Janie's like that, or Billy's like that, or whatever it is, rather than having a language and then a resolution path to support each other. Because you're not talking about working with one person in an organization. You're working with teams.
Yeah.
And having the whole team go through this, learning and adapting to how to convey when they're in their mask, and then asking for support to move out of their mask. Is that right?
That's right. And so the great thing is when you do it as a team, everybody's doing it together. And so now you have permission to say, hey, I'm working through one of my masks right now, so I'm going to try to communicate this to you. It may not be perfect, but everybody has now grace around the table to hear you, and it allows for you to grow. And it allows for everybody else to grow, because when we're removing masks, essentially there's a new version of you showing up, the real version, right? The authentic version, the authentic Mark, the authentic Frank, the authentic Lisa, right? Now, all of a sudden, we're coming in as the whole person. The great thing about that is now you got the whole person, right? Where you only had 20% or 50% of the person. Now you have the whole thing. One, they feel accepted, and 2, they're going to contribute at a different level as well. On that side of it, because they can be creative and innovative.
So 2 things. One, how'd you come up with 50?
Yeah, so I don't know how we came up with it, other than we identified the 50 personas. And so I'm like, okay, 50 is a good number, because there's 5 categories, and then there's multiple variations within the category.
Kind of like the colors you were talking about.
Yes. And so we wanted to be able to distill it and refine it down, so we could be very specific to help people identify. We wanted to be very identifiable with each of these personality profiles, personas, so call it.
And if someone had awareness of this, is it something that you've seen is instantly transformative? Does it take 6 months? Where is an organization going to start to see, some benefit?
So the aha happens immediately. Like, oh, the transformation takes time because now we got to develop new habits, new behaviors, and who we're becoming. We're allowing us to be secure and let go of our insecurities, right? And so that's a process of our own level of comfort in the work that we need to do there. The great thing is we've designed the system to help guide you through that process, to take simple, small steps to help you see it. And we also tell you what you get on the other end. And so that's the beautiful thing with it. We don't just go in unknowing, like, oh, I've got to do this work and I hope for this outcome. No, we know the outcome and we help you with that outcome. And so then this way you can feel safe going through the process and becoming who you've always been, letting go of what the world's placed on you over time. Because the reality is we've all entered the workforce at one point or another, and we've worked for our first manager or leader, right? And they may have been great or they may have not been great. But what happens over time is we start wearing things because we think that they're going to help us get promoted, be successful, all these things, because that's what they're doing. And we don't know any better. And so when we come back to the inspired culture and things like that, we believe that, leadership is caught, but it does need to be intentionally learned, because the intentionality of learning it actually helps prescribe who we are already designed to be as a leader. And now we're just going to start working through that, being in our alignment and our purpose with God.
So 2 things, and then we'll go to the next topic. First is, if you were to describe what's happened for you as your masks have been exposed and worked on, name one thing that you've seen in your life where it's like, hey, this is different.
Just being able to stand on a firm foundation, like walking into any room, meeting anyone, and totally being comfortable with who I am. I don't have to put on anything to be around anyone. And the other thing
did you know you were putting on that false persona?
I did, and I didn't.
You were doing it
I didn't know how deep it was.
Okay.
I knew, like, oh, I'm going to show up and have all this energy and all these things and whatever else, but I didn't know the depth of that. But it was actually in the room that required that, right? And so that is where
that required the mask.
Yeah. So organizationally, that's the opportunity. We've created an environment where masks are required, and we have to demask the organization to help the organization grow and flourish and really get to the root of it. And it's not a terrible thing. It's just happened over time, and everybody does it. Yeah. And so it's this thing like, let's all go through the process together, because then the realness enters into that room instead. And so that whole foundational aspect, Mark, it just changes everything. And it also gives you eyes to see, because now all of a sudden you're not thinking about how you're showing up. You're actually just there present, and you're engaging with people. And now you get, and this is where wisdom and discernment come in. When you remove the mask and you surrender that, now all of a sudden it's like the Holy Spirit can work. And now you get all of this wisdom and discernment that you didn't have before, because it's not about who you have to be, it's who you are.
Who are the types of leaders that welcome this?
Anybody that, from our vantage point, wants to actually grow and develop their people and invest in them intentionally, and see the value for who they are.
And have those leaders already kind of demasked, or are they part of the process too?
Oh, they're part of the process. Everybody participates.
So there's no shame in saying, all right, we need this, and I might have my own stuff.
Yeah, no shame in it whatsoever. We welcome it. We think it's really important because, as a CEO or the president of an organization, you got to experience it to know the transformational power of it, and to know what you're giving your people as really a gift, in it. And that's how we look at it.
Yeah, because it's not just at the office.
No. You carry it home. You carry it everywhere you go.
Yeah, it's rediscovering you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost like I've heard from multiple sources that most people give up their connection with God by the time they're 4,
Mm.
because there's this choice that a child makes to fit in. Like, hey, I want to get love from mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever is in the vicinity. And in order to do that, this is how I can receive. And so then they give up something. And then it keeps going and keeps going and keep going until we're dissociated from our true nature. And what you're offering is a non kind of psycho analysis version of, hey, we all have it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no shame in it. Most people are disconnected. We did it when we were 3, 4 years old, but it's time to reconnect because the best self is going to come through when we do. And you're doing it in a way that's really safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's kind of cool because you start, I mean, in a way, I want to ask a question here. There's a surrender that you're bringing forth through example. Like you couldn't have created this if you didn't go through the brokenness.
No. Yeah, there's no way because I wouldn't be aware. I have no clue.
So help us with that. And then I'm going to give you an opportunity to share where people can find you and any last words you have or something you want to go back to. But let's go to that idea that if I'm going through a difficult time, it helps me understand like what the other side is like. Because it seems like you've certainly gotten to the other side. And when you reflect back on, hey, you went through some really difficult times, how do you view it today?
Yeah. Well, one, I'm grateful, absolutely grateful to have gone through it because it totally transformed my life. And in a way that you're just like, wow, I'm living today. I was living before, but living for self, living for the world, it's, and this doesn't, I mean, what we're living in today is just such a place of freedom. It's light. It's also very purpose driven and focused. I'm in total alignment with what my calling is to be doing. And there's nothing better than that at all, and I think that everything that I've been through, God has used every bit of it for his purpose and what he's placed on my life today to use. And so nothing was wasted. And, really, he didn't waste any of it, any of the experiences. He just was waiting for me to surrender so he can actually utilize me the way that he'd use me.
What I love, too, about what I'm hearing in this part of the conversation is there wasn't any judgment where God's like, oh, Eric, you're bad because.
Oh, yeah, no.
It was more like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. He's like, I'm glad you're here. And I'm grateful that I have a relationship with you now. I've been waiting a long time, for you to, actually lean into this, and it's an investment, right? We have to show up to be part of the relationship. And so investing in, reading the Bible every day, to prayer, to listening, just hearing, and people are like, what do you mean? How do you hear? Well, you have to clear out your life to make room, right? We can't be so busy running from event to event to event. One of the habits I created is walking slow. And it's more than just walking slow. It's walking slow so you can see. When you're walking fast, everything's behind you and you're not making room for anyone. When you walk slow and you slow down, you actually make room for everybody else to go ahead and you can actually see what's going on. But I do the slow steps intentionally because then it allows God to be ahead of me. And so he can lead and so I can follow.
Do you have any moments where you're walking slow and you get a prompt like you did back at the house? Like, hey, go knock on that front door.
All the time.
Really?
All the time.
Do you answer this time?
Yeah, I'm answering more.
Yeah.
I'm answering more. I'm like, I'm getting in tune,
What's one or two stories where you've answered? Because I think that those are so fun.
Yeah. So let's see, you're writing this book that's coming out, of the inspired, building the inspired culture. That was something that he had said, hey, you got to do this. I'm like, okay. And then, my executive coach at the time's like, well, let me let me get you connected with these people. They'll help. And God's like, no, you can't actually talk to anybody. He's like, this needs to be created without influence from the outside.
And you honored it.
And I honored it. And so I just,
Well, that's a difference right there. You didn't knock on the door, Heather's house.
Yeah.
But you did say yes to not involving people.
Yeah. And he's like, the time's not yet. And then the time was to go. But we had to get the foundation in place first.
Yeah.
Right? Because the foundation would have had so much influence because, God was still saying, well, this is what I have for you.
Yeah.
And this is get it on paper and then create this thing and then get a client engaged and then get another client and then talk to people. Right? He's like, I want to be validated first and then go,
How do you hear God?
For me, it's like in the heart. And so I recognize, and it's like this voice in my head that comes about. And so I feel the heart alignment with the head alignment. And then it's like, and then the ideas come in and I know they're not mine. Right.
I get it. I get a question often from people who haven't had that experience. They're like, well, how can you, and I think it's a reasonable question. It's like, well, can you tell the contrast between your own thoughts and God's spoken word in you? And
I think like, as I, to process this out loud with you, are you after an outcome or are you trusting the outcome?
Yeah.
And I think that if you can really register and reflect on that statement, then you can recognize where it's coming from. Because if it's my personal motive of whatever, well, then it's of me. Like, it's obviously of me.
Right.
But it's not, and I'm not worried about what's going to end up. Well, now that's faith. Now you're trusting that, what God has for you and what you're doing and letting go of the outcome. And that was something that was hard for me to do for a really long time. And now it's just like, everybody asks, like with our business and what we're doing with the inspired culture, the 50 masks of leadership, like, what are you going to do with this? And I said, all I know is we're going all the way. Yeah. And they're like, what's all the way? I said, I don't know. We'll find out when we get there.
Right. Because we only are shown what we're ready to see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God's not going to give us all the steps. I think it was Martin Luther King who said, just take the next step, the next step, next step. You don't need to see the whole staircase.
Yeah.
You're going that way. Okay, keep going. I experience it very similarly. There's frustration for me sometimes, honestly, where it's like, hey, God, can I get a few more steps? I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. Do you ever experience that?
No, I haven't. I'm like, gosh, there's a lot to do. and I'm just working on the next thing, but he's also very clear in what he's laid out. And he has for you too, Mark, and knowing you and all of that.
Well, I got build a church, and it's like, all right, God, I resisted for a while, but then finally I relented. I'm like, okay, I'll build the church. What is it? Like, what does this mean? And so I'm learning, like, okay, what will this become? And I got a message this past week. It was so helpful. It's like, Mark, this isn't just you. Like, you're bringing something that is unique, but it's going to be a collective of people who bring what's unique from them too, to create something that I can't see, right? Because it's not just from me, it's from a collective. So it's sort of like, I don't know if this was true for the inspired culture, because it sounds like you were guided a little differently to go in that deep within. Yes, I went in the deep within, but now it's like, okay, I'm bringing something out, and I already was given a couple of names. Like, okay, invite this person, and more people will be coming. Like, okay. And that's cool. But sometimes in my egoic way, it's like, okay, God, can I have like some names, or how many people, or when, and there's the impatience part, which is a mask that I need to work on. But there's also the trust that, okay, I've seen God work enough that if it's going to happen the way that God wants it to happen, it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's my role just to be present and trust the moment.
Yeah, past CEO, I love that you say that. And Dan, great leader, really great leader, and runs an incredible company. And I was working for him, and he'd always tell me, Eric, just pray for the people that come. I'm like, okay, but I didn't totally understand what that meant, until I gave my life to God. And then I just started praying for the people to come. And he sent everybody in my organization today. Like I haven't had to literally, I placed an ad once to get people, but it was all his people that he wanted to be here. And it's the craziest thing about how it happened. And so, and then people are just coming and reaching out. Hey, I want to be part of what you're doing. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this, and praying that, God would send the people. And I just, that's what I pray for, and Mark, I think that's definitely how you and I met, because I didn't know you at all. Right. And through all of it, in that, and, we got connected through Ethan right here.
Right.
And so, just that openness.
And now the interconnections of what we're moving forward, it's an adventure, and awe gets restored, right? And I'm sure you could relate to this, that life goes from have to, oh, wow, I get to be part of this.
Yeah.
And it's truly being part of something, and being as surrendered to what God knows is being created and not what we're striving to create.
Absolutely.
It's very different.
It is.
So how do people find you?
Yeah, so our website's www.yourpathinspired.com. You can check us out there. There's links to get in touch with me on there, as well as others in our organization. And what you'll find is, a little bit about our company, what we do from the work in the inspired culture, and helping really measure the growth mindset and giving organizations the ability to see mindset in real time, which is an invaluable tool, because no longer are we reactive organizations, but now we're having the pulse today of where the mindset sits by team, by department, by location, organization, and individual. So we can take action quickly on how and where we need to invest our time, and really recognizing the real time of what's happening. So we're not rectifying history after people leave, after turnover takes place, after all these other things. We're on the front end of that. So you can find us there and learn about us on that front.
This is a $100 billion idea. This is so big, what you're putting together. I mean, it's so needed. And one of the things that corporate America has been stuck on is not that they're bad tools, but there are tools out there that are oh yeah, we've done that, we've done that, we've done that. And this is refreshing to see God bringing into the workforce something that's going to support people transforming. I think in that process, and from the stories you've shared from your clients, people don't have to go through the brokenness.
Right.
They can quickly get back into integrated self and start operating from there. And the past goes away and they move forward.
That's right.
And organizations do it together.
Yeah, they do it together and they win together, and the multiplying impact on their organization. And so we believe that everybody needs to win on all fronts, personally, professionally, relationally, and at home. And so our whole system is designed to do that, because if home isn't good, work will never be great. And if work isn't great, home is never going to be good, because we're all one person and the whole person's coming into the workforce today. And so we need leaders to be equipped, not with what's been caught in leadership, but what's intentionally learned today, for their people to grow and lead organizations to what's needed here and now. And the revenue, the profits all come, and they come at multipliers that they've never experienced before when they turn their culture on, bring that alignment in place, and really invest in their people.
I think you said the last word. Is there anything we left out?
I think we're good, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Eric. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Hey, like this and show Eric some love in the comments. Mention something that stuck out to you. We'll see you next time.